All right, guys, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to talk about a very controversial rule in Major League Baseball that has been a hot topic as of late because it's happening more and more and people are talking about it. It's very controversial, like I said, and I personally despise this rule. I think it's a broken rule that needs to be changed, and frankly, I think if it continues like this, it could potentially ruin the game of baseball. So what we're talking about today is the Buster Posey rule. So what is the Buster Posey rule? So for those of you who might not know what the Buster Posey rule is, basically in 2011, Buster Posey, the catcher of the Giants, one of the best catchers of this era, was fielding a throw from the outfield. A runner from third on the Marlins, Scott Cousins, came in to try to score the go-ahead run in extra innings. He collided with Buster Posey at the plate because Buster Posey, at least according to the Marlins player, Scott Cousins, he thought Buster Posey was in his way. So he kind of did what was done back in the day before this rule. He collided really hard with Buster Posey, broke his leg, and because Buster Posey was on the verge of, or he was basically already such a star player and a popular player for the Giants, this was one of the last, if not the last nail in the coffin, and MLB thought they had to do something about this whole collision thing at home plate because back in the 70s, 80s, the old physical days of baseball, it was part of the strategy of a base runner who was on third, rounding third, coming home to, if the catcher's in their way of sliding and trying to get to home, the base runner would do anything to get the catcher out of the way and try to score. So whether that was colliding with the catcher, disregarding their safety of the catcher, they would try to hit the catcher as hard as they could, not just at home plate. You would sometimes see this at second base, at third base, just players colliding with others, fielders getting collided by with base runners because the base runner was trying to reach the base and they felt like the fielder was in the way, and there was really no legislation against this. Basically, you could collide with the fielder and for the most part get away with it. So Buster Posey being hurt was one of the last nails in the coffin, and baseball, it took a couple more years. There were a few more incidences, but a lot of people like to think that that incident in 2011 to such a star player that ended his season was what ultimately changed the rule. And initially this rule was that it was for the benefit and safety of the catcher. It was because catchers were getting hurt. So this rule was initially made to protect the catcher from getting hit by a base runner. It was to protect the catcher's safety because catchers were getting taken out. But in an ironic twist of events, in an ironic turn of events, now this rule is beneficial for the base runner, and it's really hurting the catcher, and it gives a lot of leeway to the base runner because they rule it so quickly. A lot of times they say that the catcher's blocking the plate, even when almost all the time nowadays, they're not trying to block the plate. So it's such an unfair rule in my opinion. And recently we saw a Blue Jays Twins extra inning game where Gary Sanchez, the catcher, I guess, according to the umpires, got his knee in front of the plate or was blocking the plate with his knee. And as he tagged out Whit Merrifield of the Blue Jays, they initially said he was out because the throw from the outfield was definitely in time, no doubt about it. But they said that his knee blocked the plate, which didn't give the base runner a lane to slide, and they said he was safe. They overturned it after replay review, and Rocco Baldelli, the Twins manager, was very understandably, he was pissed off, and I would be too. And honestly, this is the replay of it, guys. It's pretty ridiculous. So you can see Gary Sanchez's left knee kind of gets in the way a little bit of the sliding path for Whit Merrifield, kind of blocks the plate for him. But the point is that this is almost always unintentional for the catcher. You have to pretend like you're a catcher in this situation. Pretend from their point of view. You do realize that when you're trying to field a throw, a lot of times a catcher will keep their mask on for the safety of themselves. They don't want to be, they're afraid, or they know that there's a possibility that a base runner who's coming in hard could hit them, and if they're not wearing a mask, they could get even more seriously injured. So a lot of times they keep the mask on for their safety. They have to focus on the throw because you never know what type of throw you're going to get from the outfield or infield. Maybe the throw is bounced in the dirt. The catcher isn't focusing on the base or isn't focusing on where their knees and legs and lower body is. They're focusing on the throw. So they're not trying to block the path of the base runner. They're not trying to get in the way. So if there's any gray area, I am 100% in favor of giving the benefit of the doubt to the catcher, because you just have to think about the fact that they're trying to concentrate on getting this throw right and then trying to apply the tag afterwards. They're not thinking about blocking the plate, and a lot of times it's not obvious that they are. A lot of times, I mean, pretty much always it's unintentional. So I just have the fear that at some point there's going to be a call like this in the playoffs, and we're going to be altering teams' destinies. So this rule needs to stop. I know it's for the safety of the game, and I think to some extent this rule obviously should stay, right? Because you have to protect the safety of the base runner and the catcher. You have to prevent them from intentionally colliding, which I'm all in favor of. But this rule is almost never intentional. Catchers, if there's sometimes you can tell, for the most part, I think you can tell if a catcher's intentionally blocking the plate. Maybe their full body is turned towards the runner. Maybe they're way behind home plate, but almost always it's not intentional. And to some extent, the reason why these catchers get their knees down and block the plate is not because they're trying to block the plate, but because they're trying to keep their balance. Because if you don't get a knee down and you just try to fully stay in front of the plate, you catch the ball and then it's kind of an awkward angle to have to turn and tag the runner. You have to turn your body around, and with that quick motion, you almost always need to get at least one knee down in order to just keep your balance and apply the tag. So basically, you're letting base runners get away with basically you're depriving a great defensive play usually, great throw usually by the outfielder or another infielder, another defender. You're depriving a great defensive play, a great job of fielding the ball by the catcher and timing it to tagging the runner. Usually the catcher isn't even thinking at all about blocking the plate, and you're basically altering calls that are out of the catcher's control and are just, frankly, just unfair, and I hate it. So, like I said earlier, in an ironic twist of events, the initial rule about collisions at the plate, I have it here. You can pause it or read it on your own. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But basically, it's initially for the benefit of the catcher, like I said. It's about the runner not being allowed to get out of their pathway, their path to home. So initially, it benefits the catcher. But then they added a rule to it that nowadays, the Buster Posey rule, the rule to protect Buster Posey and people of the same position as Buster Posey, now is something that harms people like Buster Posey. It harms the catcher's position, because this second interpretation of the rule, this is what is really the problem. This first rule, you rarely see a runner going out of their way to take out the catcher. But nowadays, you're seeing the catcher go out of their way, which they don't really do ever, to get in the way of the runner. And again, if it's obvious, rule it. You can tell if it's obvious, right? But the catcher is always looking at where the ball is being fielded. They're looking at the throw. They're never focusing on the runner. If they're staring at the runner the whole time, then yes, I'm in favor, or you can tell they're focused in. Their number one focus is to block the plate. Then I'm all in favor of saying that that is against the rules and saying that the base runner should be safe. But the catcher, a lot of times, is unintentionally, they're just trying to make a great play. A lot of times it is a great play, and they're getting robbed of it because the umpires say that they're blocking the pathway when usually the base runner is out by a mile. So I don't know, this rule, it's terrible, honestly. This second rule, it's basically the first sentence: unless the catcher's in possession of the ball, the catcher cannot block the pathway of the runner as he is attempting to score. This is already such a confusing rule, because what's considered blocking the pathway, again, and how do you tell if it's intentional, not intentional? I think if there's any gray area, any reasonable doubt, or any reason to believe that the catcher might unintentionally be blocking the plate, which is almost always, you should never rule that the runner is safe. I think it's ridiculous. We've seen incidents like this recently, the Gary Sanchez thing, and it's the worst. It's the worst rule. And honestly, it's kind of ruining baseball if it continues like this. So you're depriving the catcher has a lot to focus on already. They have a tough time seeing the ball when they wear a mask. They really have to focus on the ball. It's not a secondary thing. When the ball's coming into you, you really have to focus on the ball. What if it takes a weird hop, bounces on the ground? You don't want to let it get behind you, and then the base runner is basically guaranteed to score. So the number one thing for the catcher, if you ask pretty much any catcher, they will say, I'm just trying to focus on the ball, get my lower body in position to make the play so I can keep my balance and make that transitional move. It's always to keep your balance, focus on the ball, get fielding the ball, that's number one, keeping your balance, getting your knees down so you don't fall over, and being in a position to make the play. It's never, the catcher's never thinking about, basically never thinking about, oh, let me just block the base runner here. So again, the intention of this rule back in 2014 when it was set was to protect the catcher initially from collisions, ugly collisions, dirty collisions that we saw many in decades past. But now it's not even about safety. It's about something that's completely changing the game unnecessarily. It's a wrongful interpretation of a rule, and that's what's wrong, and I think that needs to change. So guys, what do you think about the Buster Posey rule? What do you think? Do you think that catchers, even if they unintentionally block the plate and get in the sliding path of the base runner, do you really think that the base runner should be ruled safe? Or do you think unless it's an obvious intentional blocking of the plate, then that is the only way that the catcher or the base runner should be ruled safe? I'm in favor of the latter. I think the leeway should be given to the catcher. The benefit of the doubt should be given to the catcher, because you have to think about that they're in danger too. It's not just all about the base runner's safety. The catcher's in danger too. They take a beating as it is, just catching games, being on their knees that whole time. They have a lot to focus on other than blocking the plate. It's very difficult to focus on blocking the plate while fielding a ball and keeping your balance and making a quick tag play. So that's what I think. I think it's a ridiculous rule, the way it's being interpreted now. But definitely comment your opinions, guys. Like the video if you enjoyed the video, why not? And subscribe if you're a baseball fan and you haven't done so already. I would appreciate that. And hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys in the next one.